It's my absolute pleasure to be here this evening so that I can talk to you about how and why we need to change the way that we educate. But first, a bit about me. My name's Katherine, and I love education. I love learning, and I love being in school. I loved education when I was 9 years old at Walborough Primary in the southwest of the UK. I loved learning when I was completing my undergraduate degree at the University of Cambridge. And I loved being in school every day as part of my job as a teacher at Swiss. I enjoy being in school and this experience of learning so much so that it never actually feels as though I'm at work. I just feel as if I'm living my passion. And I consider myself lucky to have found a vocation in life that allows me to earn a living whilst living my passion at the same time. But I don't believe that this should be considered a privilege that is reserved for the so-called lucky few, those who find that dream job. I really think it should be something that is accessible to everybody. And I do believe that it is our responsibility as educators to make that a reality. But in order to do this, I feel that we have 5 critical observations that we must pay attention to, and I'd like to share those with you tonight. First critical observation is that our purpose is compassion and love. You might be asking, why is a talk focusing on education beginning by exploring this idea of the purpose of life? To which I would answer that we cannot begin to evaluate the impact that education has on our lives without first recognizing how far-reaching that impact is. If we are to listen to the teachings of the Dalai Lama, so often repeated and referred to, then he tells us how the purpose of life is indeed happiness, and that this is rooted in compassion and love. We as human beings seek meaningful connections with the people around us. We seek that validation. We want that connection. We don't want that feeling of failure. Current ongoing research by Robert Waldinger from Harvard University is highlighting how relevant this is still today. His study, which began in 1938, is so far the largest longitudinal study into the impacts of aging. And the findings are clear. Those who are living the longest and happiest lives are those who have deep and meaningful connections with others. But I didn't need to quote Harvard. I'm sure I could have just asked all of you, what is it that brings meaning to your days? What is it that gives purpose to what you do? And you will tell me it's the people that you are sharing life's journey with. Now, it's no surprise that neither fame nor fortune appear to be the purpose of life. However, we can't deny how essential it is that we have financial means in order to navigate this journey. Indeed, we need money in many instances in order to access education, in order to access healthcare, definitely to have food on our plates and to have a roof above our heads. However, whilst we know that the teaching for wealth is important, our education systems seem to have not considered as much this teaching for compassion and love. If I'm to be pedantic with the semantics here, I would say that the teaching for wealth is indeed necessary, but it is the teaching for love and compassion that is essential. Learners are sitting behind classroom desks around the world. These are our future politicians, activists, singers and dancers, mathematicians. They are all having their future aspirations shaped by the formation of their educational setting. And we really need to understand this setting in a bit more detail. Which brings me to second critical observation. Education systems don't teach the individual personally. If we look at the curricula we can find worldwide today, we see an echo of that which came about in Western societies during the Age of Enlightenment, a time in history when it was really important that every member of society had a broad range of knowledge, because we never knew exactly what job they would need to do. And so we saw a curriculum where we are prioritizing a language, a foreign language, the arts increasingly, sciences, maths, the humanities. This diverse and varied curriculum gives us a certain type of knowledge, which Charles Spearman articulated at the turn of the 20th century as a G factor, general knowledge, having enough knowledge about a whole range of disciplines. And he opposed this to our S factor, that which is specific and personal to an individual. And it is clear today in the curricula worldwide that we are still championing a curriculum which is pushing our students to make progress in the development of their G factors, oftentimes at the cost of their S factors. Now, this is really challenging. We, as educators and as teachers, are faced with the challenge of ensuring that every single learner sat in front of us is able to access an increasingly broad and diverse curriculum. And this is hard. Thankfully, we know what we're doing, and we're doing an incredible job. The first thing that educators recognize is how very true that statement, which is often attributed to Einstein, but how true it rings. That everybody is a genius, but if we judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will just think it's stupid its whole life. We endeavor for every one of our students to feel like a fish swimming freely. And so, we pour hours into differentiating our learning and our teaching. We scaffold, we support. We engage with the pastoral systems in our schools to ensure that our students avoid that crushing feeling of failure. We're also quick to identify if one of our learners has any additional needs, and then we will involve the wider community. We'll look within and outside the school to find the support that that student needs. Because we know, as a teacher, as an educator, that it is only if we make these connections and understand the individual that we are going to enable them to make the progress that is required of them. We're doing an amazing job, really, well done. There's nothing wrong with what we're doing. The issue only really starts to present itself when we arrive at a point where we need to now evaluate the success of that child's learning journey. And this brings me to my third critical observation. Standardized testing negates the individual. When we arrive at the end of a child's curriculum, suddenly the structures and supports with which we have enabled them to not only access the content of the diverse curriculum, but for them themselves to remain content in doing so, all of these structures are just removed, and everybody sits the same test. In the 1990s, work from Dylan Williams really pushed forward the need for standardized assessment. And indeed he had to, because by this point, we had cultivated a society where everybody knows more or less everything. How then to discriminate from the thousands upon thousands of applications being made to universities and jobs worldwide? The increased standardization of assessment has meant that we are compromising that zone of proximal development in our learners, where they can be creative and they can explore at their own pace, because we know that we need to get them up to this G factor level of knowledge. And so, as we're thinking about how we can best support our learners, it frustrates us. We know that this is frustrating. We know when we look around a room of students sitting an exam, as I was when I was invigilating the other week, that the only real unifying factor for all of these students is likely to be the year in which they were born. And yet, this is the system that we play into anyway. It feels then as if our education systems are not quite delivering that which they are responsible for. It feels that something is not right. This in itself is not new thinking. This is not revolutionary. We have had educationalists tell us for years, in particular in the 21st century. We have Frédéric Laloux, Simon Sinek, and the great late Sir Ken Robinson, who we've already mentioned this evening. And they tell us with passion, and they tell us repeatedly, that unless we engage with the individual values and skill sets of every member of our society, then we are never going to be able to fully engage with our collective potential. So, where are we going wrong? What is it that we could consider doing differently? To answer this question, I'd like to invite you to picture education as a house. Now, in Education House, we have a number of floors, we have a number of rooms. Each one is occupied by a different curriculum. So we have the International Baccalaureate, we have the Qatar system, the British system, Filipino system. They're all there. The occupants of Education House change fairly frequently, depending on who is in government and the local authority at the time, or indeed whatever recent research has just been published. Some occupants of Education House revolutionize a whole floor. Their curriculum is just so radical, whereas others might just tweak the pedagogical furniture. In and of itself, there is nothing wrong with this. Indeed, we are seeing across the world in classrooms great progress being made as we understand recent research into the benefits of spacing and retrieval when it comes to developing students' metacognitive skills. Again, we're doing a great job. The issue doesn't present itself until we take a moment to lean out and have a look out of the window of Education House. And this is the point at which we realize that whilst we have been sitting comfortably in this house for hundreds of years now, the 21st century has suddenly shot up around us, and we just no longer sit comfortably in this new environment. What is increasingly pressing for us here today is that when we look out of the other side, out of the other window, we now see Education House again. It's the exact same. But this one wasn't built by us. This one was built by artificial intelligence. This picture was drawn by artificial intelligence. AI is becoming increasingly loud in our spheres of reference, in particular, ChatGPT, who, when I asked how it would describe itself in a TED Talk, replied by saying, I would start by highlighting the tremendous potential of this technology to transform education and improve learning outcomes for students around the world. However, I would also acknowledge the potential risks associated with the use of ChatGPT in education, such as the risk of shortcutting the learning process and undermining academic integrity. I replied, thank you very much, ChatGPT. To which they responded, no problem, Katherine. Would you like me to write the rest of your TED Talk this evening? And I said, no. I said, it's okay. I'll work it out. But it's true that AI is now presenting our learners with effectively a shortcut. But that is because what we are demanding of them is so general. We know the value of academic integrity. We uphold it in everything that we do. But I do believe that try as we might to instill this in our learners, even the most principled student is going to question, why must they continue to do something which does not engage them with their passion when there is something else now? There is a new tool that can do it for them and ensure that they don't suffer failure. And so this brings us to our fourth critical observation. If we are going to respond to this challenge, not try and deny it, then we need to recognize how it is in our individuality that sets us apart from all other technological advances. AI cannot recreate my mind or my essence, and so we need to develop that which is essential to us, our passions and our purpose. The use of standardized assessment to be the only measuring stick we use to evaluate not only the success of a child's educational journey, but also the value that they can contribute to society. This system, it has to be retired, really, to the historical archives where it belongs. Because, indeed, these benchmarks over a number of decades have encouraged a global appreciation of a knowledge economy, but now they actually present a barrier, which is ironically blocking our progress and stunting the academic and personal growth for the masses of the 21st century. So what can we do? Our fifth observation is that education systems must champion individuality and purpose. We simply must develop a system that engages with the child in a holistic way, where we acknowledge their strengths and weaknesses within and beyond the classroom. And we are increasingly hearing how this is possible. We can champion individuality if we are to identify early in a learner's path that which is their passion. And then we lead them through a curriculum that not only identifies, but enhances that specific skill factor. This is not going to be easy, but if anybody can do it, it is us. We review and write curriculum on a daily basis. We understand how essential it is that our students are educated so that they can be financially secure in the future. So we are equipped to create a curriculum that would align financial stability with personal and self-actualization. The learning must come from the individual. We cannot continue dictating it to them. And whilst this might sound a bit radical, sometimes it really isn't. Change is happening across the world, pushing us in this direction. We are seeing an increased focus on vocational learning, not just the standardized assessments. We are seeing mastery-based classrooms and self-paced learning, all which culminate in a need for us to focus on the mental well-being of our children, more so now post-COVID, possibly than ever before. So the only thing standing in our way is us. We are the ones who need to step forward so that future generations can live and breathe this change and not just talk about it at TED. We do need to be brave because we are looking to set in motion wheels of change so big that they could completely overhaul the educational landscape with which we have become too familiar. We need to be loud. We must speak with our learners, with our teachers, with our communities about this need for change. We have to open our hearts and our minds to the frustration we all feel deep down that nobody has done anything about this system yet. But above all, we do need compassion for ourselves to live true, for our profession to be all-embracing, and for our learners to fulfill their potential, their incredible and immeasurable potential. Thank you.